Dear viewers, welcome to our today's format visit. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all the valuable inquiries and letters. Thank you for the very nice and loving words. I would also like to direct you to a request that reached me from Petra. You write that you and your partner watch these programs on Sundays. You write that your partner has an EBV-infected liver. It is obvious that she already had this Epstein-Barr virus when she was 14 years old. Today she is 55 years old. And it would be inflamed again. At the same time, there is a suspicion of CFS. That means chronic fatigue syndrome. That means a constant fatigue and exhaustion. From a normal school medical opinion, you would hear that you can't do anything now. And you can't help with the liver and so on anyway. You asked for advice with this email and wrote to me that your partner is taking vitamin C, D, and zinc. Omega-3, DHEA. In addition, L-lysine in the last few days. What is your recommendation? Can the liver, for example, you spoke of the hemisphere, can you wash out the viruses? At the University of Göttingen, there would be the possibility. Let me answer that for you. Epstein-Barr viruses belong to us like daily bread. It is not possible nowadays. We sometimes get them with breast milk. Viruses are small particles in an area where no one perceives them. They are also not viable outside the cell. That means viruses always have their corresponding cellular host. Only in this host can they multiply. In order for a viral strain from nature to have a positive effect, there have been an incredible number of studies in recent years. What is the task of the viruses? The viruses are much older than the human organism. Have the viruses perhaps also promoted processes in evolution? Have they helped humans to become immune today, which is unparalleled in what humans have adapted to? That means the last questions have not yet been discussed. The fact is, however, that viruses that live in us and Epstein-Barr is the virus that is responsible for infectious mononucleosis, i.e. the glandular fever, and the severity of an Epstein-Barr reactivation is also signaled by various stages. A corresponding organ that has a very high affinity for EBV is really the liver, but not only that. Epstein-Barr is also a lymphotropist, the lymphatic system, and neurotropist, the nerve-affecting virus. But on the other hand, you have to go back a bit with its seriousness and aggression and contaminated liver. So everyone is always looking for his host. And everyone only places himself where he is allowed to place himself. And the possibility of an organism to handle with a viral strain is 125 times a million times possible per day. That means if there is a persisting infection that is reactivated, that is, if it suddenly becomes active, then the question is not about the virus, but the question is about the immunity. What about my immunity now? I also have an intracellular immunity that is aware of whether viruses are there or not, whether viruses are reactivated, i.e. only when I am weak, tend to a reinfection or a persisting infection. And viruses are just as Epstein-Barr as herpes viruses. You all know that. You don't just get the herpes, the lip herpes. You always know exactly where, when it occurs, what happened again. Did I get nauseous? Was I in the sun too much? Did I have a lot of emotional stress again? All of this has to have happened somewhere when the lip herpes, herpes simplex, reactivates again. And that is not a question of herpes simplex, but a question of an immune disorder. The same goes for the dandruff. I don't get the dandruff out of nothing. But we have seen an expansive development of dandruff in the last 2 years. But why? Because of the measures we have taken, because of the fear we have felt, because of the injections we have given. Because of the post-viral syndromes that have arisen, and so on. Viral processes always have something to do with immunity. And you have to take action. And the statement, "you can't do anything," is clearly wrong. Period. Simply wrong. If you say that, you don't know. What processes are required to stabilize again? And if it is really close to your heart, then I can point out again at this point to the new series, in which I explain the immune system to people, in order to know more specifically and consciously. Who is actually responsible for it in my body? That viral processes don't even come into reactivation. And a crucial question, and it goes far beyond that, now I'm just going to start from my life, from my experience and my knowledge. Please take a very important care of yourself now. How is your vitamin D level? Taking in vitamin D is one thing, but the other thing is, does vitamin D now have the power in our body to really stimulate these 100,000 immune regulation functions? And the natural killer cell activity, which is responsible for inactivating a viral process again, it is important that vitamin D is now sufficiently present. Vitamin D is involved in many other processes. But with a strong and good vitamin D supply, I am not vulnerable. That doesn't work. It really doesn't work that I constantly get viral reactivation and my body is in balance. These are permanent processes that now have to wake us up to question these things. One of them is really vitamin D. The other is zinc. But zinc is a trace element that you have to measure intracellularly, i.e. in full blood. Zinc is 70% important in the cell. There are a number of processes that are zinc-dependent, over hundreds of enzymes. Intracellular immunity is zinc-dependent. And if you let this intracellular level measure, then you know how far the supply on the cellular level, but also through the zinc balance, can still be optimally regulated. Sometimes I go up to 100 milligrams to simply bring a system back into balance. And this of course also starts processes that don't start now. And zinc cannot be stored by the body. That means I may have to take in 3 to 4 milligrams a day. Not soberly. Zinc beats on the stomach. Take a look at that and maybe let this level measure after the 2nd of March months. L-leucine is very good. L-leucine is an amino acid that prevents the viruses from multiplying. And L-leucine, but please in dosages of 2000 maybe milligrams. Take a look at how well you can tolerate that. 3 times 1, that's 1500. You also like to go higher. But that can really be a great support in these viral processes. Vitamin C is obvious. There are still a number of things that are important on the orthomolecular medical level. But please always think about your gut at the moment. The gut doesn't want to be forgotten on the outside. The liver is dependent on a healthy gut. If the gut ails, if the gut has an open closet, we're talking about a leaky gut, a mucous membrane permeability that has become permeable. Then the first organ is the liver. It has to bear that. The liver gets 2,300 liters of blood a day. And if the liver is overwhelmed by the things in the gut, that's hydrogen sulfide, that's ammonia, that's scatol, that's bacteria, fungi, that's parasitic things, that's so-called endotoxins, they say, when the bacteria fall apart and fragments only get into the blood. That doesn't belong in this extent. And everything comes to the liver at the beginning. But now relieve the liver. Do a lot of good to the liver. And then close the passenger closet of the intestine. These are chair examinations that can be initiated on zonulin, on alpha-antitrypsin, on calprotectin, on EPX, and on the secretory IgA to get a picture of the mucous membrane immunity. And then you get a little further. Because CFS is chronic fatigue, a weakness, a fatigue syndrome. That's quick under the Damocles sword. But ultimately, it can be in the reactivation of the Epstein-Barr. That makes a fatigue syndrome. But it can of course be on the other hand, that the liver, in its hundreds of tasks, these power viruses are always intracellular, no longer up to the task. And a typical pain that the liver has, when it is overwhelmed in its ability to perform. And simply for the body, which can no longer do this work, is exhaustion, is fatigue. The EBV also has this in phases, then different developments. A phase that the EBV is going through in the severe is exhaustion. There is so much more. But that's what I would invest my time in. Cardios marianus is the large liver plant, which helps in the context of toxicity, to detoxify the cell, but at the same time to close the cell membrane again. Help the liver by clarifying whether you have an HPU. That's the cryptopyrroluria. That is the constant loss of manganese, chromium, vitamin B6 and zinc. And then, of course, all these processes are not ready, which are needed to cope well with a viral strain, which also provoke a detoxification weakness for weeks, months, years. And so it is a very complex and large event, that you can probably discuss it with a colleague and say, where can I start? Epstein-Barr treatments through an automolecular recipe, which they do very well. The other thing is, please don't forget the microimmune therapy. And microimmune therapy is an immune modulation. As part of this immune modulation through the 2L EBV, microimmune, I create with each capsule, which I don't swallow, but open and pour under the tongue, an information on the immune system, which is currently actively dealing with the EBV. It takes about 5 to 7 months and I train the immune system in each capsule. It's a different dosage. Interleukin, interferon. And these are all things, which significantly contribute to the whole. How should I call it? To regulate the whole course of an immune cascade. And to enable a fair and honest dealing with the EBV. Now I would like to conclude with ozone treatment. We have a lot of good experience with ozone treatment. Even just to do a series with ozone. You can do it rectally. You can also insufflate the ozone gas. Intravenously, of course. And ozone has a very broadly set antiviral, antiparasitic, antibacterial effect. In addition, a very high microimproving blood circulation, i.e., microcircular improvement and thus much better oxygen utilization on the cellular level. So there are some thoughts that can be explained here. But I believe that you will find your way there. Don't you get tired of doing good for the liver in the evening through a liver roll, through a nice cystic tea, which has a very antibacterial, antiviral, antiparasitic effect. Cystic tea, but also tea from Cadius marianus, milk thistle or dandelion tea. But these are all the big liver plants that do a lot of good, I believe. And so I would approach it and not take it as a given in any way and not as infected. I have to understand my body. This problem also directs attention to the intestine. Of course, there are many, many other bacterial or parasitic diseases for exhaustion, but let's stick to this topic for now. And I hope that I was able to give you some good recommendations. And maybe you will go through the care now to look at these things. Tomorrow completely different things out of the way, because the liver here, I will repeat myself, but for you it is now a mother who talks a lot about staying healthy or maybe also having to get sick. Because help is required here. And maybe also to turn to colleagues who don't say you can't do anything about it. Maybe that's what they meant 20 years ago. But we have these things today. We no longer have chronic, severe bacterial infections, but we have chronic infections that are penetrating in the body and which are largely triggered by these viral reactivations. And this is a permanent fire that has to bring the immune system into focus and, above all, has us to recognize that Epstein-Barr is a serious topic today, much more serious than we think. Because we still do, for example, we see antiviral drugs with shingles. People then sometimes have post-zoster neuralgies, have these severe nerve infections for a long time. That's not a solution, because I have to understand a disease. And when I understand what's going on in this body, that a disease offers a platform, then this understanding has only arisen from the fact that I have understood beforehand what it all takes so that health can remain stable. And life is actually multi-causal. Today we live in a completely different time. We live with completely different stresses, so to speak. We live with completely different stresses or even toxic things that we don't hear or see at all. They are packed. We can sometimes not even recognize the small inscription. We don't suspect that the apple has been sprayed 10 times. That has everything to do with it. And if you think you're going to get the joker out and I'm going to present you with the solution, that's too easy. That's far too easy. You don't have to be the cause. I have to get to the cause. And the cause lies in you. And I hope, dear Petra, that these performances give you both a lot of courage, also a lot of joy, to understand life differently, to take life into other hands, to do good to the liver. And if you think you need a glass of wine in the evening, then I have to say, no, you don't need to. And it's not a problem to have a glass of wine. But the dose makes the poison here. And the liver, which you might want to spare from stress or exhaustion, needs a lot of care. And, of course, it also depends on the health of the liver and on our immune system. And I wish you on this journey, on this exciting health journey. I like to hold up my life with illness. And I don't embellish it or improve it or change it. I like to clarify it. And clarification means that I have to achieve that I can convey the joy to you, i.e., the desire for health. And then you can understand and learn and take these processes into your own hands. And actually, that's a very nice thing, because you can observe how a lot changes in us. And that's also the nice thing. Everything changes in an organism every day. That is, every day I have something new in my hand to change, to improve, to relieve, to meet it more lovingly, with more experience, with more knowledge. And in the end, there is a lot of light in the tunnel. And you know that too. We are now in winter, but the meadow is always getting green again. In this sense, all the best, have a good time, have a good week, all of you too. And I'm looking forward to the next show with Visite. At this point, Visite at QS24 TV would take up your request. And it will come to me. And yes, I'm happy to be able to deal with your topics. And to share the advice and knowledge with you. All the best and goodbye.